History of English Literature, New Classical Age, 1700 to 1750, Part B, Short Questions with Answers, Episode 3. Question 13. Why is Robinson Crusoe significant in the 18th century literature? Answer. Robinson Crusoe, the life and strange, surprising adventures of Robinson Crusoe of York, Mariner, was written by Daniel Defoe in 1719 when he was nearly 60. In fact, Robinson Crusoe is found to have achieved stupendous success not only in his old age but in subsequent ages, and has remained immensely popular with the generations of readers. Of the few widely read and universally popular English works, this is to be mentioned first. The story of Robinson Crusoe is based on the experience of Alexander Selkirk, who spent about 5 years on an island completely uninhabited. Crusoe is shipwrecked and has to take shelter in a lonely island just like Selkirk. He is able to salvage the basic tools and materials from the wreck, and by means of his ingenuity manages to manufacture the means of his shelter and livelihood. Crusoe's industry and ingenuity are the matters of commendation as well as fascination for all young hearts. Robinson Crusoe also creates suspense by relating the dangers following from visiting cannibals. Crusoe's inquisition of a composition, the selfish man Friday, whom he saves from the cannibals, adds further to the human interest of the work. In fact, suspense, excitement, and thrill, the materials for popular enduring appeal for the book, and it is the implied moral note of the success attraction are amply present in Robinson Crusoe. There is also an enduring appeal for the book, and it is implied moral note of the success of the passions and industry. Robinson Crusoe is written in a simple and vigorous style. In fact, Robinson Crusoe has immense significance in English literature. It is often regarded as the first English novel. It is good ideal of the story element of the novel. Question 14. Write a short note on Gulliver's Travels. Answer. Gulliver's Travels, written by Jonathan Swift, was published in 1726. It is the most famous and popular work of Swift. Its success was immediate and tremendous. Even today, Gulliver's Travels remains an extremely popular storybook. Gulliver's Travels has a good ideal of fictional elements in it to win so much popularity. It is told in 4 parts. The first part tells of Gulliver's shipwreck and his shelter on the island of Lilliput. This is an island inhabited by some of diminutive beings. Gulliver is taken to their court, and he has an amusing experiences of their controversies, wars, manners, and so on. The second part relates to Gulliver's experience in the place of Brobdingnag. Here the inhabitants have gigantic sizes. They have to their own way of living, manners, and customs. In part 3, Gulliver's visit to Laputa is presented. This is a place where the learned and abstracted from the realm of common sense and constantly attended by flippers, the servants equipped with a blown leader. The purpose of this instrument is to remind the learned of their function and duty. In part 4, Gulliver describes his visit to the land of Hyeonhams, virtuous beings with the bodies of horses. They cherish their powers of reasoning and are wholly governed by it. They have at their disposal a filthy race of man-shaped beasts called Yahoos. The work ends with Gulliver's return to home with a thorough distaste for their Yahoos. Gulliver's Travels is a sort of allegory in which the author's purpose is satirical. Swiftier, under the cloak of fantastic stories, satirizes the politics of his days, the religious quarrels, the wars of ambition, the lubrications of science, and also the very nature of man and of the whole human species. The allegorical element is presented in an entertaining way, and the moral aspects is nowhere rudely pushed forth. This remains a more piece of satirical literature in prose written in a simple style. It is a measure for his greatness that greatest of the children's classic is also one of the greatest and bitterest satire in English literature. Question 15. Who is Edmund Burke? Answer. Write a short note on his speech on the conclusion with America. Answer. Edmund Burke was the last great prose writer of the 18th century. He was also the greatest of English orators. As a writer, he was ranked among the English authors of the first class because he was easy to understand. As politician and statesman, he is one of the finest figures in English history. Burke was always a devoted Whig and soon made himself the brains of Whig party because he believed that the party system was the only available basis for representative government. He also believed that the Whig was committed to uphold the cause of public righteousness and to the championing of freedom. Burke was in favor of freedom and justice and declared that freedom and justice can be secured not by violence but under the forms of law, government, and religion, which present and best wisdom of past generation. Burke's most important discussion of American affairs are the speeches on American taxation and the speech on conciliation with America. This speech were delivered in the Parliament. His plea was that although England had a theoretical constitutional right to tax the colonies, it was impractical to do so against their will. Therefore, the attempt was useless and must lead to disaster. Hence, measures of conciliation instead of force should be employed. Burke suggested that the attempts to override the liberties of Englishmen in America would establish an adverse reaction. In fact, Burke's speeches are a monumental historical document during his time. Reflections on the Revolution in France is a magnificent political pamphlet in which Burke denounces the Revolution as the mother of all evil. Burke's gifts as a writer are nowhere better illustrated than in the last work. The permanent value of Burke's speeches and writings lies in their style. His style, oratorical, he is a great rhetorician, rich in passionate declamation, excelling where splendor and forces are required. His prose is full of color and splendor and vigorous rhythm. It recaptures the ornate style of the Elizabethan and Caroline prose. Burke's literary work possesses classical qualities. They are rich in thought and style. Question 16. Write a short note on Samuel Johnson's dictionary. Answer. Dr. Johnson became one of the literary dictators of the 18th century besides Dryden, Addison, and Pope. He was different from other masters of the age. He was individual of all 18th century authors. The strength of his personality, his eschewed classical ideals, helped the other authors of the age. He even helped the progress of the rising of Romantic movement. The preparation of Johnson's Dictionary of the English Language became the most decisive work of his life. The dictionary, in a successive enlargement, became a standard one, and it gave the definite hardship of English literary life, though it took place after his death. It should be added the English language expanded since his time. Johnson's first edition contained almost 400,000 words, as recorded in Webster edition. With the dictionary, it is connected with his best-known incidents in English literary history. In his undertaking, Johnson got financial help of Lord Chesterfield, who was a leader of fashion and of fashionable literature. The dictionary marks an epoch in the history of English. It was a kind of challenge to the world. The dictionary filled the nation with a pride in their language. Foreigners who wished to learn English could now learn it in the method and spirit of a scholar from this dictionary. It is a monument of labor and scholarship. Johnson frankly recognized the language as a living thing, and that life means growth and change. Language is the work of man, of a being from which permanence and stability cannot be derived. In the dictionary, he records the present use and past history of words as accurately as he could find them. He thought it more important to codify the floating and uncertain rules which a student of the language found indifferent and impossible to reconcile. This is the aim he set before him, namely to present the purity and ascertain the meaning of our English idioms. Johnson's dictionary has many faults, especially of etymology. It is not a guide to pronunciation of words. His definition of words are sometimes incorrect, some prejudiced, some verbose, but they are based on common sense. Question 17. Write a note on Boswell and his life of Johnson. Answer. Dr. Johnson, acclaimed as the literary dictator of the 18th century, owes his immortality as a man and literary master to his biographer James Boswell. He became famous for his great biography of Dr. Johnson. Life of Johnson by Boswell made him immortal in the history of English. Boswell's Life of Johnson appeared in 1791 and became one of the greatest biographies in English. The biography made him immortal. In this biography, the talks of Johnson was recorded. This book shows a disciple's devotion to his master. Boswell demonstrates his devotion by a single incident. He firmly recollects the sayings of the doctor and regards them as sermons. The notable sayings of the great doctor remained a great source of knowledge for the generations to come. Boswell, with admirable dexterity, recorded the works of Johnson while writing the biography of the great man. Consequently, this biography became one of the great works of 18th century literature. Boswell's biography represented Johnson in his habits, his wit, his wisdom, his good nature, good humor. In other words, an idealized picture of life in the true image of Johnson is described here. The life became a great work of art. The picture became larger than life, and Johnson lives in our memory like a great character in the history of English literature. Boswell found a great subject in the personality of Johnson, and both of them became immortal because of the biography. In other words, they have made each other immortal. The Life of Johnson remains a masterpiece in the literary works of the 18th century and the English biographical literature of all times. Question 18. What do you understand by the term Gothic novel? Write a note on the Gothic romance? Answer. The Gothic novel, or the novel of terror, is the peculiar product of the later 18th century. It owes its rise and popularity to the general awakening of the feeling and sensibility evolved to the middle of the 18th century. It was a conscious protest against the rational, realistic creed of the earlier novelists. It is a new species of romantic fiction which drew its inspiration from the general revival of interest during this period in medieval life and art, in pseudo-Gothic castles and artificial ruins, in ancient ballads, and in Gothic churches and cathedrals. In fact, the extravagance of the Romantic writers created new kinds of romance which became known as Gothic romance. The Gothic stories were actually located in the Middle Age, but their main subject is not to give an accurate picture of the medieval life, but to arouse terror in the reader by means of fantastic description of gloom, distress of the heroine, supernatural mystery, excessive use of horror, bloodshed, gloomy atmosphere. In other words, these stories were extremely absurd stories and were new in English language. For example, The Mysteries of Udolpho by Mrs. Anna Radcliffe was a popular Gothic romance. Horace Walpole is the father of the Gothic novel. The Castle of Otranto is an attempt to use the Middle Ages as a setting, and it pretends to be a translation from the early Italian work. There is all the paraphernalia of terror and villainy in it, such as the ghost, the haunted castle, villain. It started a war that was to be an important factor in the growth of the Romantic movement. In fact, the historical and Gothic romances gradually attained to the ranks of great literature. However, these stories were historically important because they prepared the way for the novels of Walter Scott and others. In other words, the historical and Gothic romances contributed to the development of English literature, and consequently we find novels of purpose dealing with abuses of society. Question 19. Who is Thomas Corey? Write a short note on elegy written in a country churchyard. Answer. Elegy written in a country churchyard is one of the greatest poems of English literature. It has received two unmeasured and undoubted praise, and certainly there are some reasons for that. The elegy is praiseworthy for its universal appeal. The poem was written more than 200 years ago, but even today it is solace to all human and reflective minds. The churchyard abounds with images which find a mirror in every mind, and with sentiments to which every bosom returns an echo. Gray's elegy is not a revolutionary of socialistic poem. Its compelling force lies in its majestic statements about human life and the dignity of the common lot. The poem sings of the triumph of life in which all artificial barriers are cast down. Gray's elegy teaches, but it pleases too. The lofty ideal of the poem is expressed in a most finished and artistic way. It reveals Gray's genuine poetic genius. The poem justifies Gray's claim to the highest poetic honor of his time. Gray's elegy is perhaps one of the best known poems in English language. Some of Gray's praises have become household words. In fact, the elegy makes a transition from the early period of classicism to the later period of romantics. It has many classical titles. It has an abundance of personal personifications and other artifices of classics. But it takes the readers from the narrow confines of the city and shows a genuine feeling for nature and for simple humanity which lives in the depths of nature. Thus, the elegy, despite its many conventional titles, is romantic in its mood stance as transition between his period of classicism and his more highly imaginative poetry. Question 20. Write a short note on Oliver Goldsmith. Oliver Goldsmith was an important literary figure of the second half of the 18th century. He tried various careers, law, medicine, and playing the flute at various places. He made desperate attempts in making a living. His writings drew the attention of famous persons like Dr. Johnson. Then his fortune and fame began to rise. Goldsmith's first poem, The Traveller, deals with his wanderings through Europe, written in a Hury couplet. In other poems, The Deserted Village deals with the memories of his youth. Goldsmith may be called a transitional poet because his poems have emotions. They combine humor with pathos. The Ballad, The Hermit, is done in a sentimental fashion. He wrote witty elegy on the death of a mad dog. Goldsmith wrote two prose comedies, both of which rank high among their class. The Good-Natured Man and She Stoops to Conquer made a reaction to the sentimental drama that dominated the literary scene of the 18th century. He revived the comedy of manners minus the grossness of the Restoration comedy. The Good-Natured Man was not successful on the stage, but She Stoops to Conquer has an immense popularity because of his hilarious laughter and romantic appeal. Goldsmith has prose works of astonishing range and variety. The Citizens of the World is a series of imaginary letters for a Chinaman whose comments on English society are both simple and shrewd. Goldsmith wrote many essays in the manner of addition, and his prose style is lucid and easy. His novel, The Vicar of Wakefield, is an important work of fiction. The plot is simple, the characters are human and attractive. The Vicar's characters is depicted with pathos and humor. He also wrote the history of England and a history of art and animated nature, a kind of textbook in nature history. These books are not important by themselves, but they show the range and volume of his works. Question 21. What is Pamela? Write a short note on it. Answer. Pamela, or Virtue Rewarded, is the first name in the rise of the English prose fiction in the middle of the 18th century. Samuel Richardson is the author of this work. He is usually recognized as the first English novelist, as is Pamela, the first English novel. It was published in 1741 and occupies indeed the position of the pioneer in the art of English novel writing. The theme of Pamela centers around the attempt of a young gentleman to seduce and violate the chastity of a young, pretty, virtuous maid, Pamela, who works under him. The story told in letters written between different characters brings out both the events and the mental trend of different characters. Richardson's novel is observed Richardson's novel, as observed, is written in the epistolary form. Pamela's letter retrace her trials, her sense of duty, her clear conscience, her self-respect, together with her secret tender affection for her coarse persecutor. Richardson's approach is of course didactic. His effort here is to emphasize the ultimate reward of virtue. Pamela's sense of honor and strength of character constitute her virtue, which finally gets rewarded. The seducer that is her master fails in his attempt. He marries her ultimately, thereby rewarding her virtue. The moral aspect of Richardson's work is empathic. Richardson's approach, however, is not merely psychological and moral. It is also realistic. Social realism is the basis of his novel. He presents the 18th century English society in different aspects. The sociological rule of the novel is firmly grounded in the very first fictional work. Richardson's novel, Pamela, is somewhat sentimental. His sentimentalism and didacticism make the environment of Pamela very heavy, and it lacks the liveliness of Fielding's Tom Jones. Pamela gets importance for its epistolary method. It seems to have inspired many 18th century novelists, including Smollett and Fanny Burney. Thank you.